Wait, you're a Bears fan and you're not subscribed to my channel? Before this video starts, make sure to 1. Hit the subscribe button below to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. 2. Hit the bell notification because you, my friend, are a diehard Bears fan. And 3. Like this video and tell all the Bears fans you know about the channel. Alright, that's better. Now that you're actually subscribed to the channel, make sure to bear down and enjoy this video.
Now this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan.
That boy is Benny Hunter.
Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. In Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Before I continue with today's episode of Keek on the Mic, I just want to remind you guys once again that I will be going live tomorrow on YouTube at 5 p.m. So make sure you come join me to have a really fun conversation about the Chicago Bears, and make sure you have all your questions ready for me, and I will answer any questions you may have on anything Chicago Bears. I look forward to seeing you guys there. So we're going to take a break from all the nonsense of the coaching carousel or who Matt Eberflus wants on his coaching staff. And today's question on the podcast and this conversation that we're going to have today is, do you guys think the Chicago Bears can compete as soon as next year? For me, it depends who you're asking. Some people will say, well, if Aaron Rodgers leaves Green Bay, yeah, I think we can win the NFC North. Or you may ask someone else say, oh, absolutely not. The Bears are in a rebuilding process right now. There's no way they compete next year. Well, during the press conference and even after the press conference, Ryan Poles made it very clear that he feels that the Bears could compete right now and that they are absolutely not in a rebuild, which I find some truth to that. When you look at the Chicago Bears roster, I think it doesn't need to be a full rebuild. We have quarterback Justin Fields. We have building blocks like Darnell Mooney, Roquan Smith, Jalen Johnson, David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, Tarik Cohen coming back healthy, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn. That doesn't seem like a team that is really in a rebuild. But the one thing I would say to Ryan Poles, if he wants the Bears to actually compete, if you're talking about playoffs or Super Bowl, he didn't make that clear. He just feels like the Bears can compete. But if that's the case for Ryan Poles, if he has those ambitions to get the Chicago Bears back to the playoffs or compete for the NFC North, right? He needs to make some solid moves as soon as this offseason. So on today's episode of Keek on the Mic, I'm going to give my 9 offseason moves that I would make if I was in Ryan Poles' situation that would help the Bears hopefully compete as soon as next season. So starting off with number 1, and as always, you guys can comment down below the offseason moves that you would make in order to help the Chicago Bears compete as soon as next season. I would love to hear from you guys. Starting off with number 1, the Chicago Bears should re-sign Jakeem Grant. Man, what a season Jakeem Grant had. We traded away only a 6th-round pick to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for Jakeem Grant. And ever since he has come to Chicago, he has been absolutely electric. Not only in special teams, but being a big part actually of our offense. When I look at Jakeem Grant, I look at that Green Bay Packers game, Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field, where in the first half, him by himself was beating the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, Jakeem Grant is now All-Pro this season, going to the Pro Bowl, and it only cost the Chicago Bears a 6th-round pick. Jakeem Grant can be the Chicago Bears return specialist for years to come. When we didn't re-sign Cordell Patterson, I was truly worried about who the next return specialist would be for the Chicago Bears. Then Ryan Pace traded a 6th-round pick for Jakeem Grant, and it has paid huge dividends for the Chicago Bears organization. I feel that re-signing Jakeem Grant would not only keep your special teams top notch, I feel that new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy can also incorporate them into the offense, because every time Jakeem Grant touches the ball, he is absolutely electric. This should be one of the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles, one of their top priorities, bringing back Jakeem Grant, because like I said, every time he touches the ball, he is absolutely electric. So I hope Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears re-sign Jakeem Grant. Offseason move number 2. The Bears need to sign, draft wide receivers. Obviously, we know that A-Rob is on the way out. It's looking that way. I hope that they can, correct the last regiment's mistakes, hopefully get that relationship better with Allen Robinson. But by the looks of it, it looks like Allen Robinson will not be a Chicago Bear next season. But that's okay, because when you look at the free agency wide receivers, it is absolutely loaded with guys like Chris Godwin, even though he's coming off an ACL tear. Devontae Adams, not sure if they're going to get him. Mike Williams, right? There's been rumors about the Bears trading for Calvin Ridley. So the possibilities are endless for the Chicago Bears, even if they lose Allen Robinson. But with Darnell Mooney, obviously he was a rising star this year, but with Darnell Mooney being the only wide receiver technically under contract for the Chicago Bears, that's not looking too promising. So the Chicago Bears need to get wide receiver help for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense. And I would truly double down at receiver. Not only would I sign a guy like Mike Williams to add to Darnell Mooney, I would also look at the NFL draft to add explosive talent at wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Some names that come to mind is Purdue's David Bell or Ohio State's Chris Olave. I know a lot of people are saying, well, maybe if Chris Olave drops to that second round, right? You can pair Justin Fields and Chris Olave back together in Chicago, and I truly feel that that would be a special thing. But all in all, if I was Ryan Poles, I would double down at wide receiver and make sure Justin Fields has the most weapons as possible. You can also think about Tarik Cohen coming back, right? Of course, if you re-sign Jakeem Grant, you can also use them as part of the offense. Of course, you have David Montgomery, all those guys. But at the end of the day, we definitely need to get some more receivers in here for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense. Offseason move number 3. I would convert Tarik Cohen into an offensive weapon role. Obviously, with the emergence of Jakeem Grant as a specialist, and obviously with Montgomery and Khalil Herbert, we are set at special teams and we're set at running back. So where does that leave Tarik Cohen? The anticipation that Tarik Cohen will come back healthy this year, right? And that's the hope. He's been out for so long now. But the hope is that Tarik Cohen comes back healthy and explosive. So where does that leave him? He can't really be a special teamer. Jakeem Grant has that role. Obviously, Montgomery and Khalil Herbert have the running back room locked down. What I would do with Tarik Cohen, I would use Tarik Cohen like the Falcons and the Niners use Deebo Samuel and Cordell Patterson. I would use his athletic ability, his explosiveness as part of the offense. Not specifically as a running back, not as a receiver, but Tarik Cohen would become my Swiss Army knife at this point. And if Luke Getsy was smart, man, he can do so much with the offensive firepower that he already has. Especially when you're thinking about Jakeem Grant being a part of the offense and Tarik Cohen coming back healthy. There are so many things that Luke Getsy will be able to do with this Chicago Bears offense. And overall, I think converting Tarik Cohen in the offense a little bit more, him coming back healthy, would be a benefit for the Chicago Bears offense. Offseason move number 4, and this is one that Bears fans are screaming at the top of their lungs for. They need to invest in the offensive line. The main goal is Justin Fields needs to have clean pockets. He needs to remain upright in order to make those accurate throws. Take those deep shots. Those deep shots only come if there is time for Justin Fields to throw. So Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears need to invest in the offensive line. I am confident that Ryan Poles and new assistant GM Ian Cunningham will get this done for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. Of course, you have two young offensive linemen in Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum. But Ryan Poles in this offseason needs to go heavy offensive line. Of course, I would have re-signed James Daniels, which is a free agent. Of course, you have Cody Whitehair. And you could also consider going to free agency, right, in the draft. So let's just talk about free agency for a second. Of course, you can go out and get guys like Brian Allen, which is a center from the Rams, to replace Mustipher. You could still re-sign Mustipher and keep him as a backup, but Mustipher needs to be replaced at center. You can also look at guys like offensive tackle Dennis Kelly from the Packers. You can also look through the draft. But this is going to be the most important development, not only for the Chicago Bears offense, but for Justin Fields' development. If he has time and he's able to stay upright, this is going to be, to me, a very dangerous Chicago Bears offense. So Ryan Poles, like I said, I have so much confidence that he's going to do this. Him being an ex-offensive lineman, this is going to be a huge deal for Ryan Poles in the development for the Chicago Bears in order for them to improve and compete as soon as next year. Offseason move number 5. The Bears should consider trading back and or trading future draft capital to acquire more selections in this year's draft. Obviously, the Chicago Bears only have 5 total draft picks in this upcoming draft, with only 2 of those being in, I believe, the top 3 or 4 rounds. So, obviously, the Chicago Bears need to figure out a way to get more draft capital. I'm not in the business of trading draft capital to move up this year. I would most likely either trade back in order to get more draft capital in the top 100, or I would consider trading some players on the Chicago Bears roster in order to gain more draft capital, which I will talk about in a little bit. But all in all, 5 draft picks is not going to be enough to bring in some quality young players to help improve your football team. So Ryan Poles is going to be dealt with a tough task to get the Chicago Bears more draft capital. So that should be one of the main priorities in this coming offseason, is trying to figure out ways to get more draft capital. And you can be creative with it as well. So I'm interested and intrigued to see what Ryan Poles does in order to get the Chicago Bears more draft capital for this upcoming draft. Offseason move number 6 I would do. Bears should consider trading Eddie Jackson. I know there's a lot of Bears fans that will probably agree with me on this move. I really like Eddie Jackson, but ever since we got rid of Adrian Amos, and ever since Vic Fangio left to be the Denver Broncos head coach, it's been a constant decline for Eddie Jackson. And I truly like Eddie Jackson. I feel like in 2018, he had a really good season. But ever since that 2018 season, Eddie Jackson has slowly been inclining. I truly feel that if you pair Eddie Jackson with a true strong safety like a Adrian Amos, I think Eddie Jackson would be able to go back to his normal self. But that just hasn't been the case. We've been swapping in strong safeties year in and year out. And I truly feel that Eddie Jackson has been struggling because of that. Added on, you have to think that Jackson will count for $15 million, $17 million, $18 million against the cap in the next couple of years. If the Bears are able to find a trade partner, and this move would suck because I do like Eddie Jackson, but if the Bears are able to find a trade partner for a mid-round selection, I would consider trading Eddie Jackson. Not only that, I think it would save a couple of million in cap space as well. And knowing the Bears' situation with the only 5 draft picks in this upcoming draft, the Bears and Ryan Poles are going to have to make difficult decisions in regards to maybe trading pieces on the team, like Eddie Jackson. Offseason move number 7 for me. The Bears should re-sign Akeem Hicks. I've said this since last offseason, right? I said if Akeem Hicks comes back and he can keep the injuries down and he can be a dominant force on the defense, I would consider re-signing Akeem Hicks. The unfortunate part about Akeem Hicks, once again, this year, he struggled with injuries. He wasn't on the field that much this season. But the one thing that is true is that every time Akeem Hicks is on the field, he is a dominant force for the Chicago Bears defense. He is the soul that keeps this Bears defense going. But the unfortunate part is that he just cannot stay healthy. In this case, I have to weigh the pros and the cons. The pros is that when he's on the field, he is a dominant D tackle. He truly helps the Chicago Bears defense. They are better with him on the field. The cons is that he just cannot stay healthy. So either way, the Bears have a really tough decision to make in regards to Akeem Hicks. This is what I have to say about Akeem Hicks. If he is willing to take a discount, I am going to sign him. I would re-sign Akeem Hicks. Maybe like a 2-year, maybe even a 1-year deal for maybe about $4 or $5 million, right? If he agrees to take a discount to stay in Chicago, which he's made it known that he would love to retire a Chicago Bear, so maybe he will take a discount. So if he is willing to take a discount, I would be more than willing to re-sign Akeem Hicks because I truly feel that the positives with him and what he brings to the table when he is healthy outweighs the negatives. So that is just my personal opinion. And if he's willing to take a discount, I'm bringing Akeem Hicks back to play in this very interesting 4-3 defense that Matt Eberflus is going to bring to Chicago. Offseason move number 8. The Bears should cut ties with Danny Trevathan. Obviously, this has been a move that has been anticipated. I think it is going to happen. I think he's definitely one of the top cut casualties that the Chicago Bears will have. And this one sucks because Danny Trevathan was one of the souls of the Chicago Bears defense for years. He was a truly great player in his time in Chicago, but once again, just like Akeem Hicks, injuries have plagued him, and he's definitely not the same player that he used to be. So that's the difference. Akeem Hicks is still playing, very, very good football when healthy. Even when Danny Trevathan is healthy, he's looked like he slowed down quite a bit. He's just not the same contributor of this Bears defense that he once was. So this will suck because Danny Trevathan's a great guy. He's been a heart and soul of the Chicago Bears defense. The only thing that sucks about cutting Danny Trevathan is it would endure a dead cap of $8.9 million. So now that means he would still count against the cap. I think it has something to do with Ryan Pace and how he structured this contract extension with Danny Trevathan a couple seasons ago. But I think you should just count your losses and cut Danny Trevathan, especially with the emergence of a guy like Alec Ogletree. You can also look for into the draft or free agency to bring in that next linebacker to pair with Roquan Smith. But at the end of the day, one of the moves I would make is to cut ties with Danny Trevathan. And the final move, the 9th and final move I will make this offseason, if I was Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears, the Bears should consider trading Eddie Goldman. And this is another thing. Obviously Eddie Goldman sat out 1 year. He came back, had a decent year. Obviously, when you're playing the position that Eddie Goldman plays, he makes all the dirty plays, right? He doesn't. His name's not always going to be in the newspaper, right? Like Khalil Mack or Robert Quinn. But he does all the dirty work in the middle in that beef of the defensive line, right? But with the emergence of Khyiris Tonga, which Khyiris Tonga was a seventh round pick last season, he emerged as a pretty solid piece for the Chicago Bears defensive line rotation. So with the emergence of Khyiris Tonga, the Bears could use Eddie Goldman as a trade piece. If they decide to keep him, that's fine as well. I think he's still a very valuable piece to this defense. But once again, just like I said about Eddie Jackson, not only could you save money, but you can probably earn another mid-round pick by trading Eddie Goldman. And with the Bears only having 5 draft picks in this upcoming draft, the Bears are going to have to make tough decisions on this roster and kind of throw guys around saying, hey, we have these guys. Are you willing to give us maybe a mid-round pick for Eddie Goldman or Eddie Jackson? It's going to be tough. Some Bears fans may not like it, but when you're in the NFL and it's a business, these are some of the tough moves that Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears may need to consider in order not to only save cap space, but to get more draft capital in this upcoming draft. So these are my 9 offseason moves that I think Ryan Poles should consider making in order to allow the Bears to hopefully compete in this upcoming season. Once again, like I said earlier, this all depends who you're talking to. Maybe half the Bears fans think that the Bears will compete, and maybe the other half saying there's no way. They're still a couple of years out. But I want to hear from you. Do you truly think that the Chicago Bears could compete as soon as next season, or do you think they're still a couple of years off? Let me know down below in the comment section. I would also like to hear some of your offseason moves. What would you guys do if you guys were in Ryan Poles' decision? Also, let me know down below in the comment section. Before I let you guys go, I just want to remind you guys one more time that I will be going live tomorrow on YouTube at 5 p.m. I hope to see you guys all there. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms. Make sure you share this episode of Geek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for all new Bears podcasts right here on Geek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
Riding with Country Bear. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic.